Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. Savannah Chrisley forced to silence before mom's resentencing. Julia Chrisley has a new resentencing date set up for 2 weeks from now. However, there are questions about where Julie is as she awaits the resentencing. Savannah Chrisley was asked about her mother's location, and she said she wanted to say something but was told to keep quiet until after the resentencing. Here is what you need to know about Julie Chrisley. Julie Chrisley awaiting resentencing. While Todd Chrisley still faces about 10 more years in prison, Julie Chrisley might see her sentence changed. This comes after the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals identified a legal error in her original 7-year sentence. In June 2024, a judge agreed that Julie's appeal showed insufficient evidence to support her sentence. The court found Todd Chrisley's 12-year sentence was appropriate. However, since Julie hadn't been involved since the start, she possibly needed a smaller sentence. She is still guilty of fraud, so there is still a prison sentence, but it could be much shorter. The sentence could be reduced enough to get her out of prison by next year. She could also spend the last part of her sentence in a halfway house. The courts could also rule that she be returned to her home state to reconnect with her family. Since then, Savannah Chrisley said she had plans for her mother's homecoming, but later said she couldn't say much more. Savannah Chrisley says she has been told to keep silent. Savannah Chrisley was asked about her mother's location as they await the resentencing. Someone posted on social media that Savannah needs to report to the fans about her mother. However, Savannah responded and said she was told not to say anything. "There are things that I don't have answers to at this point in time," Savannah responded. "Per my lawyers, I need to stay quiet until after mom's resentencing date on September 25th. Trust me, so much I want to say. Thank you for loving and supporting us." All the questions started when Julie's lawyer said she was transferred out of Lexington, Kentucky, and the prison she was placed in. However, since she is a public figure, her whereabouts are kept private during the resentencing. Her attorney said she was being kept in a state or county facility before her court date in Atlanta. Savannah Chrisley sat alone in her quiet living room, surrounded by an oppressive silence that seemed to press in on her from all sides. She was used to being vocal, open about her thoughts and feelings, especially in recent years as the Chrisley family's legal troubles had become very public. Savannah had spent countless hours defending her parents, Todd and Julie, standing by them despite the endless whirlwind of scandal and court cases. But now, days before her mom's resentencing, she was caught in a strange, heavy silence, feeling as if her voice had been stripped away. There were new instructions from her family's legal team, strict warnings to stay quiet, to keep her emotions and thoughts to herself. It was essential, they told her, that no further statements or social media posts come from any Chrisley family member until after Julie's resentencing. With emotions running high, there was too much at stake. One wrong word or misunderstood sentiment, and it could impact the judge's decision, they explained. It was a complicated legal game that required absolute silence on her part. Savannah was feeling the pressure, not just from her family but from the media, fans, and even her own restless spirit. Every time she picked up her phone, she felt an urge to log onto Instagram, to post something heartfelt about her mom, to send out a prayer or simply let people know what she was going through. Her fingers itched to write, to speak out, to share. But she couldn't. Not now. She replayed her mother's voice in her mind, comforting her in recent months. Julie had always been a calming presence, even in the worst of times. Savannah remembered their late-night talks, her mom reassuring her that things would be okay, that she just had to stay strong. Now she was left with only the memory of those comforting words and the weight of not knowing what would happen next. As she paced the room, Savannah found herself mentally crafting a post, imagining the words she would use if she could just say something, anything, to let out the ache she felt. She thought of the many fans who had reached out, offering words of support or asking how they could help. She wanted to let them know what this ordeal had been like, to give voice to the pain her family had endured, but instead, all she could do was keep those feelings bottled up inside. At one point, she went to her favorite drawer and took out a journal she hadn't written in for years. Its pages were filled with memories of simpler times, of family vacations, of laughing with her brothers and her mom and dad over silly inside jokes that only the Chrisleys would understand. She felt a pang of nostalgia mixed with sadness as she flipped through the pages, wondering if life would ever go back to what it once was. She picked up a pen, thinking maybe, just maybe, she could write her thoughts here. If she couldn't speak out, at least she could write for herself. She started with a simple line, "I don't know how to feel." But even that felt overwhelming, and she quickly closed the journal. The words she wanted weren't simple, and they certainly weren't something that could be contained in a few lines. What could she say to capture the pain, the hope, the fear, the love she felt for her mother? How could she put into words the helplessness of being forced to stay silent? Days passed slowly, and Savannah tried to stay busy. She threw herself into work, recording her podcast episodes, but every conversation felt like a shadow of what she really wanted to say. Even the podcast was off limits for anything related to her mom's case, and every episode felt like a forced smile, a polite dance around the real topic at hand. But she went on, always careful, always polite, trying not to let the cracks show too much. On the night before Julie's resentencing, Savannah couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, her mind racing with all the things she wanted to say. Her hands tingled with the urge to write a post or maybe even a private letter to her mother, but her phone lay face down on her nightstand, untouched. She turned off notifications and muted calls, avoiding anything that might tempt her to speak out. Suddenly, she remembered a time when she was a little girl, upset over a schoolyard spat. Her mom had taught her a little trick for keeping her thoughts under control. "Savannah," Julie had said, "take a deep breath and count to 10. If the words still feel right after 10 seconds, say them. But sometimes silence says more than any words can." Savannah hadn't fully understood then, but now, as she took a deep breath, she could almost hear her mother's voice guiding her through. She counted to 10, then 20, then 30, and she realized something surprising. Even though she longed to speak, she didn't need to. Maybe, she thought, silence really could speak louder. Her silence could be a testament to her faith in her mother and a quiet act of resistance against the storm surrounding them. The next morning, Savannah went to the courthouse with her family. The press was everywhere, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Savannah looked straight ahead, her face composed, her step steady, knowing the world was watching. People wanted a reaction, a soundbite, a tearful moment they could plaster across screens. But Savannah was resolute. She had her mother's strength inside her, and she held it close, guarding it with the silence she had come to understand. Inside the courthouse, she glanced at her mom, who sat poised, her face serene. Julie gave her daughter a small smile, one that said, "I'm proud of you." In that moment, Savannah felt a surge of peace. Her silence wasn't just a burden or a restriction, it was a choice, and in choosing it, she felt closer to her mother than ever. The judge entered, the court came to order, and the proceedings began. The whole world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the final verdict, the words that would decide their family's future. Savannah closed her eyes, sending up a silent prayer. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing with certainty. Whatever words were spoken, whatever the outcome, she would keep standing strong for her mother and her family. And if, when it was all over, she still had no words left to say, then she would let her silence speak for her.